Greetings, campers! Welcome to the world according to Yoni. In case it slipped anybody's mind, my name is Yoni Martin, and I am the host of this mess. I am very glad to have those of you who are longtime viewers and listeners back. If you're new to the show, welcome. I hope you are entertained. I hope you have fun. And I hope maybe even you'll learn something. Who knows? I've got a great guest today. He is a friend of the show. He's been on before. He's an author. He is the author, as a matter of fact, of the best-selling book, Lee Marvin, Point Blank. A wonderful, wonderful biography of the great actor Lee Marvin, and a New York Times bestseller, so that ain't too shabby. But Dwayne has a new book. It's called Killing Generals, The Making of the Dirty Dozen. Now, for those of you who may not know what the Dirty Dozen is, let me tell you, it is one of the best World War II movies ever made, bar none. Spectacular script, cast led by Lee Marvin, and just a wonderful, wonderful movie. And Dwayne's book is remarkable. I mean, it's one of those books, when you finish it, you wish there was more. And it's climbing up. It's an Amazon bestseller at the moment. And hopefully, if you all listen, it will become another New York Times bestseller for him. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I give you my friend, Dwayne Epstein. Hey, Dwayne. That's
Yoni, what's much to you?
Too much. How are you?
I am very well, actually. Thank you. I'm doing
Good. You know, you are now one of only two people to get two shots on my show.
I feel very special.
You should. You should. Now, of course, in this new season, I'm going to be doing a lot of people who've been here before, but you know, hey, what the hell?
Right.
So anyway, we are here to talk about your book, Killing Generals, The Making of the Dirty Dozen.
Can you see the poster behind me?
Yes, I can see the poster behind you. It's very nice.
Isn't it?
Surprised it's not framed, though.
Well, it's not the original. My girlfriend got it for me as a present. It's a repro. I had the original, but long story. What happened to it?
Hey, listen. Who cares? The book is great.
Thank you.
And I should say, you know, when you were on last time, we were talking about your biography of Lee Marvin, which was a New York Times bestseller.
Indeed, it was.
For any of you people out there who have not read Dwayne Epstein's biography of Lee Marvin, go get it. But that was followed up. Oh, look, he's giving us a little bit to the side. Yeah, there you go. So looks for like those of you looking, Dwayne is holding up his book, Lee Marvin, Point Blank. There it is. And okay, get it out of the screen.
Yes, sorry.
And for those who are just listening, well, you now know the name. Go get it. And Killing Generals. Oh, I'm going to throw that up there. You don't have to put it up on the screen.
Okay.
I'm trying. I mean, I've told you what I think about the book, but for the audience's sake, I'm going to say it's A, one of those books you can't put down, and B, at the end, I was pissed. I wanted more.
I can't put it down either. It's all right. I'm sorry.
Yeah. A little self-promo there, Dwayne. Good.
Oh.
But, I mean, talk about, you know, how you went from Lee Marvin to this book about a film starring Lee Marvin.
Oh, it took no time at all. A mere 10-year gap. That's all. It's very. How can I put it in a nutshell? Let's see. Lee Marvin, Point Blank proved to be a surprising success. As you mentioned a moment ago, it went to number 4 on the New York Times bestsellers list. And had it not been the week that Maya Angelou had died, it may have gone to number 1 or 2. But that aside, my agent, one of the best people I've ever met in my life, was a gentleman named Mike Hamelberg. And Mike got me the gig. And then Mike Hamelberg passed away. sadly.
Oh,
And when he passed away, he wasn't a young man either. When he passed away, he kind of left me in free fall. Now, I had gotten a contract for another book with the same publisher, a book on a biography of Charles Bronson, another personal favorite. But for one
yeah.
reason or another, that contract got canceled, and I was kind of like at a loss for what to do. I got some freelance gigs here and there, but for the most part, I wasn't able to sell any of my ideas because I didn't have an agent. Well, there's a guy named Lee Sobel who contacted me out of the blue, and he's an agent. He's a literary agent, and he asked me if I wanted his representation, and I was kind of like, I've never had an agent do that before. Why are you contacting me? And he said, why are writers so cynical? you know? And so what I did was I looked him up, I checked him out. He was legit. And then we started talking. And he and I started throwing ideas back and forth. And one of them was a book about the making of the Dirty Dozen. Would I be interested in doing that? And I went, oh, hell yeah. So I did some initial research and I put together a proposal. He submitted it, and amazingly, in record time, not months or years, in about a week or two, we got an offer. So I took it, and I kind of had to hit the ground running because the publisher wanted the book done in like 6 to 9 months, which is a really short period of time to research and write.
Especially when you're researching. Yeah, my God.
Yeah, exactly. And so I did it. And I was lucky on a couple of levels. One of the reasons why I was able to get it done in time was that a lot of the research I did on Lee Marvin point blank, especially on the making of the Dirty Dozen, of course, it's in Lee Marvin point blank, but a whole lot more wasn't in Lee Marvin point blank. And I had that in my archive. So I was able to utilize that. Another great coup was being able to get an interview with the man who wrote the original novel, a gentleman named Mick Nathanson. And I got it because a friend of mine who's also a writer, Beverly Gray, had interviewed him for a magazine, but it never got published. And she asked me if I wanted the interview. And I went, oh, God, Beverly, yes. So I transcribed that interview and got a lot of great exclusives. I was also able to find, now the movie came out more like almost 60 years ago. And there ain't a whole lot of folks left.
Boy, that's aging both of us, isn't it?
Yeah, sadly. But I was able, Ken Hyman, the producer of the movie, he was still alive, and he was not easy to find because he wasn't on the grid, even in this digital age. He's in his 90s, and he lives in England, but I was able to find him. And as I like to say about that, how come there's no famous Jewish detectives? There should be. But anyway.
That's a good question. But think of it this way: Humphrey Bogart married Lauren Bacall, who was Jewish. So
there you go. Yeah,
that's about as close as we come, I think.
Right, or Peter Falk playing Columbo. I mean, anyway. So Ken Hyman set me straight on a lot of great things. Most of the photos you see in the book, the small photo section, I got from him. I also interviewed Donald Sutherland. I had interviewed Clint Walker about 3 times before he passed away. And many of the siblings of the stars of the movie, like all 3 of Robert Ryan's children, Clint Walker's daughter, oh gosh, so many people, and some of the surviving cast members, the so-called bottom 6, the other non-starring characters. Okay, Colin Maitland, who became a sports reporter for the BBC, I interviewed him. Oh man, so many people, and they helped tell the story of how the Dirty Dozen was created, produced, and left a lasting legacy in terms of the influence it has on film to this very day, which I was very proud to write about.
I suppose for those who may be a bit younger and are not familiar, we should tell them The Dirty Dozen is a World War II movie that starred Lee Marvin, obviously. And it is, as far as I'm concerned, it's maybe one of the 2-3 best movies about World War II that I've ever seen. And for those who have seen Sleepless in Seattle, they do a whole little riff in that movie on the Dirty Dozen. So at the time, and for many years, and for people our age, Dirty Dozen is an iconic film. And you know, 60 years later, to have this book that tells us so much detail about, I was fascinated, obviously, but uh, the fact that you were able to do that and speak to these people, and get the book written in that period, because I remember you were talking to me about it uh, the last time you were on the show,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, how are you going? You told me when it was due, and how are you going to do that? Well, you did it. I mean,
I did it. Yeah, I definitely did. I'm as surprised as anybody, to tell you the truth. Another, I was just thinking about this. Another factor in me getting the information that I got was there was a lot that was written in the archives of memos and magazines, and periodicals at the time. The movie was chronicled on kind of, when it was in production, on kind of like a daily basis. And there are websites and there are um, archives, obviously. One of the best being the Academy Library, the Margaret Herrick Library. They had files and files on it. And also, you know, Robert Aldridge, the guy who directed the movie, he had some pretty interesting memos going back and forth between he and Ken Hyman before the film went into production and during production,
right.
as well as with the people who ran the censorship office, the Motion Picture Association of America.
Was
There
that
was
Jack
some
Valenti at the time?
no, it was a gentleman named, I think his name was Gerald Sherlock, something like that. He took over for Breen, Joseph Breen. And it was an interesting time period because it was movies like The Dirty Dozen, as well as it was a watershed year for films. I mean, it was a sea change in terms of the way films were made and what they were about. It was the beginning of the so-called New Hollywood. And it came out the same year as Bonnie and Clyde, Cool Hand Luke, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, In the Heat of the Night, The Graduate,
Wow.
all these really important and impressive Hollywood films. And it was because of those movies that the very next year they invoked the motion picture code. G, well, and then it was M, and then R, X, and then later it would be PG and GP and all like that. But it was because of these movies and the memos that flew back and forth between Robert Aldrich, Ken Hyman, and I think this gentleman's name was Spurlock or Sherlock, were about how many times you can say a certain word, what had to be cut out
You can
because
say
it's.
any word you like here, so you can tell them what the word.
Oh, I can.
Oh,
Okay.
sure.
Well, I'll tell you. A lot of those words they gave in on. You know, the compromise was you can say bastard, but you can't say bastard more than 2 or 3 times. So they only said it twice in the movie. It was these guys. The premise is real simple. Lee Marvin is a character who's charged by his officers, I mean his higher ups, to take 12 convicted violent criminals and train them for a secret mission. Now, the fact that they're violent criminals, they're not going to say, oh, darn, or gosh, or gee whiz. They're going to say, son of a bitch. They're going to, they did leave in one, I believe one time when Telly Savalas called Jim Brown a nigger. That was left in. There are other places in the script where he said, where he and others say it more often, as well as Jew and Dago and all those fun American terms were cut back. Matter of fact, one of my favorites is the one early in the film when John Cassavetes' character refuses to march, and Lee Marvin pulls him aside and smiles and goes, "Look, you little bastard, you either march or I'll beat your brains out." And then in the original script, it's, "Look, you Dago bastard." So bastard could stay, Dago had to come out, which it's weird the
So
way
they
it
didn't
works. But
even
in any
try
event,
motherfucker or something.
oh no! I don't even know the first film in which fuck was first said, but I do know once the MPAA code came into being, it was probably like 68 or 69, but I'm not sure what film it is. And the funny thing is, years later, the rules were so strict in terms of the social mores at the time. I remember there was that movie Harry and Tonto with Art Carney, and the
Right.
only wonderful movie, and the only reason it got an R rating, because it's the only time in the whole movie anything like this happens, is one character calls another character a cunt, and for that one word, it got an R rating. Otherwise, it would have been G or PG. But that's how it worked. I mean, hey, Midnight Cowboy won Best Picture,
And it was rated X.
It was rated X, and then
Yep.
years later, it was re-released. It was rated R. So there you go.
Yeah,
it's about the social
bizarre.
mores.
The mores of the time. Hey, look, the mores of this time. I
Right.
don't get, because
I don't either.
you know, I like reading.
I don't know how this stuff works.
Yeah, no, I don't think they know how it works. And
Right.
that's part of the problem, because I've seen it where, on one film they'll be one way and another film another way, and there's no rhyme or reason.
Well, yeah, it's a weird game they played. I know sometimes they'll Martin Scorsese would tell a story. No, it wasn't Martin Scorsese, excuse me. It was Joe Pesci telling a story about Martin Scorsese, that oftentimes, in order to have the film, while it's in production, be pre-sold to television, they would shoot a given scene two ways. One for one for film distribution, right, and one for television distribution. And Joe Pesci told the story about how Scorsese shot a scene in Raging Bull one way, and Joe Pesci saw him do it, and then Scorsese goes, okay, now we got to do it again for television. And Pesci purposely teased Scorsese. He stood behind him and went, gee, Marty, I didn't know you were making movies for television. And Scorsese got livid, and he was, God damn it, he's fucking right. He's absolutely fucking right. Let's just leave it the way it is, God damn it. And that consequence, Joe Pesci's little tease wound up not getting it. I don't know if it's ever been shown, Raging Bull, on network television, to tell you the truth. They may have, but maybe they cut it themselves. I don't know.
I can't remember, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah. And one of my other favorite examples is sometimes, especially on television, for television, that they would purposely shoot a gag or a scene or a moment, knowing it'll get cut out by the censor, or
right.
In TV, it was standards and practices, because what they would do is they would use that for leverage. One of my favorite examples was the one they did for Laughing. They did this thing where it was like Dan Rowan and Goldie Hawn, and they're tourists on a cruise ship, and they have, they're wearing Hawaiian leis, and Dick Martin is the captain, and they're leaving, and Dick Martin tells Dan Rowan, it's customary when leaving Hawaii to throw your lei overboard. So he picks up Goldie Hawn and throws her over the railing. And they knew that wasn't going to get on the air. They absolutely knew. And so they used that to leverage it for other bits.
Right. Yeah. And I gather they're still doing it for network television.
That's my guess as well.
Yeah. But the thing is, on network television, I've noticed they've gotten a lot more lax. And, and obviously they have to, because they're now competing with every cable station on the planet.
Right. I know. I kind of feel sorry for network television, which of course explains why there's that in the strikes, that there's a plethora of reality shows, which I cannot stand. I hate reality shows.
They're not reality. I mean, come on.
No, of course not. And that's another thing. It's like calling an infomercial. There's no information there. It's a fucking ad. Come on. Anyway, but I'm pontificating way too much here.
That's okay.
The thing about The Dirty Dozen, what makes it such a lasting, for lack of a more intelligent word, lasting film, is that, first of all, it's not dated. It's held up very well. And second of all, the point of the film. There are several themes running in it, but anything that intelligently and humorously can make the point about the hypocrisy of society and be anti-authoritative and the characters are antisocial, but also to a certain extent anti-war. Anything that does stuff like that is going to last a long, long time, because if this country and society in general loves anything, they love the underdog, they love the outlaw, the guy who goes against the rules and succeeds. And there's a lot of that in the.
Well, I mean, that was Lee Marvin's career.
Absolutely. And at the time the film came out, there was a raging controversy, not only about whether the film was any good, but also about the extreme violence in the film. And also, critics bandied back and forth in different essays about, is the movie antisocial? Is the movie anti-authoritative? Is the movie anti-war? And to a certain extent, it's all of those things, but to another extent, it's none of those things. Because in some ways, it is just a straight-on war movie, especially towards the end of the film. But in the character development, and also, one of my favorite examples about how anti-authoritative that movie is towards the beginning of the movie, when Marvin has to meet with his commanding officers, and they're basically what they're supposed to be doing is telling him what the mission is and what he has to do, but they're also berating the hell out of him. And it's not even so much a meeting of, like a military meeting and officers. It's more like a corporate America meeting at this big conference table, and they're all there with their little pads and pencils and files. And Ernest Borgnine, who is the main CEO, is standing over them. And whenever he mentions something that's not even funny or slightly funny, they all have to laugh. They're all yes men. He says something like, "Oh hell, I know a lot of people that can go just that way, huh?" And they're like, "Oh yeah." Everybody does that, but Marvin. Marvin's like the only one who doesn't play that game, and that's what I mean. It's like thumbing its nose at authority. So in that sense, yes, it does exist, and in other scenes in the movie as well.
But going back to the part where the censorship in terms of violence was always okay. I mean, Straw Dogs. Straw
Dogs was a little later. So was the Wild Bunch. But
sure, but
it's like there's a difference between action in a movie and violence in a movie. Action kind of, like John Wayne movies, will make you go, "Yay for the good guy! Yay!" He killed some Nazis. Violence is brutal. Violence makes you go, "Ooh, gee, look what they did to that guy," And The Dirty Dozen was very violent. And in the same year, a few months later, Lee Marvin had another movie come out, Point Blank, which was pretty damn brutal. It's often been called the first art house action film because it's a very stylized movie and it's really brutal. And then came Bonnie and Clyde, and then came the Wild Bunch, and then they kept raising the bar. And the basic point, as far as Lee Marvin was concerned, was that was his entire mission as an actor. He always said all of his movies, especially the ones he had leading roles in, but all of his movies had to make the point that violence isn't fun. Violence kills people. He would always say, the more real I can make it in a movie, the more brutal it is, the more I can turn people off on the idea of committing it. Of course, that's a questionable point of view, and I don't always agree with that point of view, because you can make it fun too. He would say, if I'm going to have to kill somebody in a movie, I'll shoot him. He'll topple. I'll walk over, turn him over, shoot him 2 more times. Let them know that, let the audience know the guy is dead, and let them see how brutal it is. And there's a lot of that in The Dirty Dozen.
Oh, yeah.
Among other films.
But I mean, I guess we should mention the fact that Marvin served in World War II. He was wounded. Right. He saw the reality of war and death. So I know that when it came to his film career, and I especially know this because of you, it was very important for him that it not be glamorized, it be shown as is, which is why some of the dialogue, it's like, instead of saying, "Hey, you fucking assholes," it's almost like silly pudding, some something like that. I don't know.
I'm gonna kick your keister down the street as opposed to I'm gonna bust your ass, pal.
Yeah, exactly. It's like in retrospect, now looking at it from this, today, if they were doing a movie about a war, we all know the soldiers are not exactly, it doesn't breed, what's the word I'm looking for? Genteel behavior, shall we say.
Right. One of the few critics who not only gave The Dirty Dozen a rave review, she seemed to truly understand what Robert Aldridge's point was. It was, I believe it was Judas Christ, who's one of the few critics I actually like. I'm not a fan of critics in general, but anyway, Judas Christ said, Robert Aldridge did it right. He understands that war is insanity. It's not, it may be very, quantitative. It might happen a lot, but that doesn't make it natural. It's not a natural order of things. And so consequently, it's a work of insanity. And since it is insane, let's let these characters get insane, because that's what war is. She understood it. one of the critics who didn't get it was a guy named Bosley Crowther, who
Oh
wrote for the New York
God.
Times.
He's
He said
horrible.
the spirit of hooliganism that permeates this movie from beginning to end is like some kind of sin or shame or this, that, or the other. And what's interesting, and I don't know the guy's name, there was a critic for a Christian magazine who gave the movie a rave review. He said, he started it by going, my fellow Christian members, The Dirty Dozen is the best movie you'll ever see that shows what war is really all about. I urge all my Christian friends to see this movie. I was blown away by that.
Yeah, that's.
It's like, yeah,
but
you know,
Crowther didn't get it.
Yeah, right. All these so-called intellectuals make these ridiculous points. And what I love is when a critic, and they seem to do this a lot, even to this day, when a critic will find something wrong in a movie that they feel, it's purely their opinion, will find something wrong in a movie and then blame the filmmaker for it. It's like, you know, that's your problem, not theirs. They do it wrong. One of my favorites who used to do it all the time is Pauline Kael. She, have you ever seen the movie Jeremiah Johnson?
Yep. Robert Redford, of course.
Yeah, great movie, and the ending is pretty powerful. When after all the killing that's been going on, he sees an Indian on horseback across a frozen lake, and the Indian puts his hand up like this, as in peace, right? Redford stares at him for a long time, grits his teeth, and does it right back. And that's the end of the movie. It freezes on that. Pauline Kael said the movie is degenerate because he had Robert Redford and Sidney Pollack, the director, had the audacity to have his character give the finger to an Indian. That's not what he does. It's so ridiculous.
She was a very well-respected critic, and I couldn't stand her.
Me neither.
She was
one of my favorite stories about her. She was writing in a cab with John Cassavetes to get to the New York Film Festival, and because she had berated one of his films, he said to her, "You think you're going to the New York Film Festival with me? Well, you're wrong because you ain't going at all." He took her shoes and threw them out the window. I love that. I thought that was so cool.
You gotta love Cassavetes. Well,
me too. I was a huge fan.
That brings us to another thing about the movie, which is, my God, the cast they had.
Oh boy, one of the greatest in movie history, and so eclectic. You would never think any of these guys would ever be in a movie together because of their personas and previous work, and yet they clicked. I mean, there were occasional during the making of the movie, there were some dust-ups, but nothing really serious. And Ken Hyman was the one who told me, and I love that he said this. He goes, on the very first day of rehearsal, he said, I watched the cast turn into the Dirty Dozen. You can just see the way they were going to work together, and they did it brilliantly. And and there was some fun teasing going on here and there. I know John Cassavetes and Telly Savalas used to get into a mock argument about where you could get the best Greek food in New York. Things like that.
Well, I mean, you got Cassavetes, you got Donald Sutherland who took a small role and made it a lot bigger.
And that was all his own doing, by the way.
Very smart. A precursor to a great career,
Right. That scene in which he imitates the general was directly responsible for him getting the lead in MASH.
Wow.
It's an involved story.
I didn't even think of that. Yeah,
that's pretty cool, huh?
I remember the little smirk on his face as he's going down, reviewing the troops. But let's say,
where you from, son?
Yeah, Richard Jekyll. Richard Jekyll, who
Robert Ryan, Ernest Borgnine.
Well, Robert Ryan is the nasty general, was great.
Right.
You'll love to hate him. It's and you have to have somebody who's a foil for the Dirty Dozen, and he was a good one. I don't want to give the movie away for those who may not have seen it, and if you haven't seen it, I don't know what the hell your problem is, unless you're very but
George Kennedy, Trini Lopez, Charles Bronson, Jim Brown, who we mentioned a moment ago. Just an amazing cast.
And Clint Walker, who we mentioned. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
It was an amazing cast, and at the time when most of them were still alive, also, uh, these were important people. They became, if they weren't already, important people in the
Right.
industry.
As a direct result of the movie, some of my favorite examples was because Ken Hyman produced The Dirty Dozen, he went on to become the head of Warner Brothers Seven Arts. He took over the whole company. Robert Aldridge, from his success in the film, was able to buy his own studio and make some movies. It didn't last very long, unfortunately, because his choices were rather strange. But in any event, Charles Bronson went on to become an international movie star. Jim Brown launched an entire genre of films called blaxploitation. It's amazing the effect that, and Donald Sutherland's career was launched. It's amazing.
Cassavetes.
Yeah, and the thing about Cassavetes was, had he not made The Dirty Dozen, he would not have been able to go on to become the independent director we know of today. Ken Hyman told me this story about how Cassavetes didn't want to make the film. He didn't like the script. He didn't like anything about it. And Ken Hyman, he said, I almost had to punch him out to get him to do it. He had almost like a fist fight. He said, he goes, look, Cassavetes was being sued by Universal, and he was basically at the time blacklisted in Hollywood. He wasn't able to get a job for a couple of years. So I'm sorry. Ken Hyman told John Cassavetes, you want to finish your movie, do The Dirty Dozen, take the money, use it to finish your film. That'll make you happy, right? So Cassavetes agreed to it on that level, and that's exactly what happened. And it wound up creating a kind of a way in which he would do things. Sometimes he would star in films as an actor, which like the next film he did, Rosemary's Baby,
Rosemary's
and
Baby.
do it just for the money. Yeah, and do it just for the money, so we can go on and make Husbands, Minnie and Moskowitz, Love Streams, Opening Night, all these really wonderful independent films. Gloria, right, in which he kind of created the way the American independent cinema movement exists. He's like the grandfather of that. I mean, there were some before him, but he set the way in which it was done forever, and it's still being done that way.
Yeah, and it's I mean, even then he was an influence like on people like kids like me. I was a kid, but I was like, he was doing something that was interesting, something different.
Right.
And
not like everybody. And what I love is when people say, these so-called independent filmmakers now say, John Cassavetes allowed me to make the kind of movies I want to make. And most of these people who say this, they all are Gen Xers or Zoomers or whatever term they use, or millennials, about their own lives, about how insignificant their lives may seem because they're still at home living with mommy and daddy and they want to do something with their lives or what have you. Cassavetes never made movies like that. He always made movies about the middle class or the upper middle class or middle-aged people who are struggling with their relationships with their husbands or their wives, or it's so funny, the influence, but it's really more about his style of filmmaking. But there's a great story about how what's her face, his wife Jenna Rollins, would leave notes around the house because he filmed a lot of his own stuff in his own house. You can recognize those scenes in many films. Right. She would leave a note on the refrigerator and say things like, John, please don't plug the Klieg lights into our electric system. We got a blackout last night. Things like that.
Minor trivial blackout at home.
Right.
But I mean, he didn't exactly hurt Jenna Rollins' career either.
Right.
But
but she was pretty damn good on her own, let me tell you.
No, she was a great actress. I mean, there's no two ways about it. But let's get back to the book, which, while not yet on the New York Times bestseller list, is an Amazon bestseller, right?
Yes, it is, thankfully.
But honestly, I think it deserves as much as Lee Marvin Point Blank to be on the New York Times bestseller list. And I've said this to you before.
Yeah, you have, and I very much appreciate it. So if you can get your followers to follow through, that would be terrific.
Okay, so all of you out there have your marching orders now. Help Dwayne get his book, Killing Generals, The Making of the Dirty Dozen, onto the New York Times bestseller list. How can you?
I know it sounds very selfish of me to ask that and self-promotion, what have you, but the fact of the matter is I agree with you. I think because of the way it turned out, I think I did a decent job. And more importantly, I like to think people will read the book and see the movie in a way they hadn't thought of it before. I've had people telling me, wow, this is great. I'm going to see the movie again and then read your book. And I said, do me a favor, do it the other way around. Read my book and then see the movie. And you'll be enlightened because of the things I got to find out. You'll watch the movie and go, oh, wow, so that's how they did that. Oh, I understand now. Or that's why they did it that way. So I like to think people will do that. And more importantly, it would create a kind of a reappreciation of the film.
Yeah,
And
well,
it deserves it.
absolutely, it deserves it. And one of the things that I found really interesting was when you were talking about, we all know if you write a book and they make a movie from it, there's going to be differences. It's going to be changed. And
Oh, big time.
you know that Dirty Dozen, the novel, very different than the movie. But I haven't read the novel, but from your book, I think I like the movie better than the book. And
Well, I'll tell you, I got flack from some reviewers saying that I did. It came, some part of it came in the beginning of the book. Some people would snarkily say it's more like a book report the way you summarizes the novel. They're missing the point. I did that for a reason. In order for them to understand what changes were made from the book to the novel, I mean the novel to the film, they need to know what the novel was about, and that's
right.
what I did, and that's why I did it. And there are those who read the book and reviewed it who completely understood that, saying things like, "I never read the book, but now I know what the book was about, and I don't have to, thanks to Dwayne Epstein." And wow, it's a trip to find out that this is what was in the book, but it's no longer in the movie. And by the way, one of those people that was most amazed by how the movie turned out was the author of the original novel, Mick Nathanson. As he said at one point, depending on certain aspects of what was done in the movie, he said, Aldridge had a lot more balls than I did. Like, well, he meant that in terms of the ending, because it was a lot more violent than it was in the book.
Yeah, the ending was kind of brutal.
Yeah. And there's an interesting story about that, too. But Nathanson, in the book, when Reisman gets a hooker for the Dirty Dozen, he got just one hooker, and they all took their turn. And Nathanson said, Aldridge was also a lot more generous than I was, because he brought in a whole truck full of hookers.
Right. I remember that.
Which
like I said, that's why I really love the movie. And, I'm one of those people. I don't like violence. I don't like blood and gore, and but for anybody who thinks that's what the Dirty Dozen is, they're missing the point, and they're
agree.
Missing the movie.
Right. I've always said, there were so many sequels made to the film, TV movies. There was a short-lived TV series. There were countless ripoffs, and they all missed the point. Every single time they try to do something that is like the Dirty Dozen, they forget it's not about the mission. It's about the characters. 2/3 of the movie is a character study. It's only like the last third that's about the mission. You get to know what these characters are like. You get to see them interact with each other. You get to see them under strenuous circumstances, and they show them how ingenious they can be and use their ingenuity in interesting ways. And in conflict with each other. That's the key, not the mission. The first sequel was in the early 80s, and Lee Marvin, Ernest Borgnine, and Richard Jewell were all in it again, and it was a ridiculous premise. They get a whole new crop of Dirty Dozen, and they're on a mission to keep Hitler from being killed. That is so stupid. I'm sorry.
Okay, I don't get that, and I vaguely remember that they did that, but I it wasn't very memorable. So
no, the logic was Ernest Borgnine's character he believes, well, he finds out that there's a plot to kill Hitler, and that would be a big mistake because that would turn Hitler into a martyr, and then the war would last forever. So we've got to keep Hitler alive. It's like, what?
For some reason, that is. Oh boy, you know what I'm thinking, right?
Right.
Yeah, it kind of mirrors things happening today.
Yeah, there's a left-handed logic to it, but it doesn't really work in real life. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we got to get rid of the bad guys. That's
Bingo.
real simple. Anyway,
Yep.
Dwayne, uh, this has been great.
Well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. We're not
Oh,
going
you got
anywhere.
something else? Okay.
Yeah, you got to tell me the Errol Flynn story about your
Oh,
dad.
the Errol Flynn
Told me to
story
remind
wasn't
you.
for the show. It was uh, for just you and me. But I'll tell
Oh,
it.
okay.
So I'll tell you after we wrap up here.
All
And
right.
for you
That's your.
listening or watching, sorry, maybe someday I'll tell you the Errol Flynn story. But right now, that's for Dwayne.
And I get to hear it.
And Dwayne gets to hear it. But I want to thank you for coming on and talking about this wonderful book that made me miss a couple of meals and a night's
No,
sleep.
wow.
No, I mean, there are certain books you read that you can't put down and you don't want to put down. Um, there's a certain actor who has a new book out. You read his autobiography, and it was another one like that. You know, you just
Wow.
can't put it down.
Thank you.
So I really want to encourage people, however many of you are out there, to go read this book, get this book, buy this book. Wayne could use the royalties,
Yes, you
and
could.
and you won't be disappointed. You really won't.
I
So,
will add one more thing, though. Like you mentioned a moment ago, it's on Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, and wherever better books are sold. But as of last week, I finally, after many efforts, 6 efforts, I signed a contract for another book.
oh, congratulations!
And I don't believe anymore in jinxing it because the contract's been signed. I'm doing a biography on Roy Scheider. Remember
Really?
him? Yep.
Oh, that'll be interesting.
Yep.
Okay,
Now,
so not only do you have to read Killing Generals, The Making of the Dirty Dozen, but when it comes out, you have to read Dwayne's biography of Roy Scheider.
it's interesting because once again, I'm going to be put under the gun time wise. The publisher wants it out in time for the 50th anniversary of the release of Jaws. So I got to
Ooh.
hit the ground running.
You get to speak to Richard Dreyfuss.
I'm going to try. I'm
Yeah.
going to definitely try.
Well,
He had a great take on Scheider. He called Scheider a knock-around actor, an actor who does his job. It doesn't put up a lot of BS, and whatever they ask him to do, he does, and he's a wonder to watch work. And I love that he said that. I think that's cool.
Well, I will look forward to that. And again, thank you for being here. And
Thank you for having me. I always have a good time talking to you, Yoni. Always.
I always have a good time talking to you. We've been doing it a lot lately. Anyway, we'll sign off on this and get the book.
Yeah. See what you've been.
And there you have it. That's Dwayne Epstein. And really, folks, buy this book. You will not regret it. If you're into film, if you're into actors, if you're into entertainment, or just a really good book, you want to read Killing Generals, The Making of the Dirty Dozen. Now, I had promised myself, since this is my first show back after a while, that I wasn't going to do a rant. And for those of you who are new to the show, at the end of every show, I indulge myself by giving a rant dealing with the political goings-ons of the day. I wasn't going to do that today because, I've been gone for a while and I just wanted this one to be fun. However, there is an elephant in the room that I cannot ignore, so I will not ignore it. In case anybody hasn't guessed it yet, I'm referring to the Hamas terrorist attack on Israel last week. Now, I understand there are a lot of people with very mixed feelings about Israel. I happen to be one of them. On the one hand, as a Jew, I'm really glad it's there. On the other hand, I am not real thrilled with the treatment by Israel of their Palestinian citizens. I think it's been horrible. and I don't agree with it. I don't support it. This does not make me an anti-Semitic Jew, by the way. It just means I don't believe Israel right or wrong any more than I believe America right or wrong. If your country screws up, as a citizen, I believe it's important for you to say something. And in Israel, they are saying things. I'm blanking on the name of the newspaper, but one of the major newspapers in Israel condemned Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu for allowing this attack to happen because he was focused elsewhere, like on the Palestinians. And it is an important thing to remember. Hamas and Hezbollah are terrorist organizations. They are murderous scumbags. But they are not the Palestinians. There may be some Palestinians in the organizations, but they are no more the Palestinians than every single person in the United States is a maggot. Okay? We don't all support the fascism of Donald Trump and his cronies in Congress. No, we point out that it's wrong, and we do our best to fight it. And there is fighting going on about it in Israel. This doesn't take anything away from the fact that what Hamas did is a crime against humanity, and they should be brought to justice for it. But let's also remember that under Bibi Netanyahu, who, as far as I'm concerned, is himself a fascist, things haven't been real good for the Palestinians. And what's really, really irking me is this is coming back all over the world, and especially here in the United States, not only on Palestinian citizens of the United States, Muslim citizens of the United States, but it's having an effect on Jewish citizens. It's having an effect on aliens. And by aliens, I'm not talking about illegal immigrants. I'm talking about people who have legally come to this country. We're not even getting into the legal aliens thing right now. It's a god-awful thing that's happened, and there's no way to talk about it without pissing someone off. I get it. But, facts are facts and reality is reality. A 6-year-old Palestinian child living in this country was murdered yesterday. He was murdered. Why? Because he's a Palestinian. A 6-year-old. Now, if that doesn't signal there's something wrong, I don't know what does. You can go tell me about the terrorists in Israel who are horrible, who deserve to be brought to justice. I said that. But are the terrorists here any different? A terrorist or terrorists who would go after a 6-year-old boy because of his national background? It's insane. And we are living in insane times. I don't know what the answer is, but I know that we all have to help get behind this and do whatever we can. I think my doing this is something I can do. There's not a lot I can do, but this I can do. So please, think about it. Think about what you can do, if anything, and let's try to make this world a better place, not a worse place, because we've got enough troubles as it is. And therein is my non-rant for today. And now that I've had my little say, I want to thank you all for being here today. If you're new, again, thank you for coming. I hope you come back. If you're a longtime viewer or listener, I'm really glad you stuck with me. We have some great guests coming up on future shows, and I promise we will not go through another long period without my presence. I don't care what happens to me. I could fall down the stairs. I could break a leg. I'll be here, okay? So thank you for coming to the show, watching the show, listening to the show. And remember, please subscribe to the show if you're on YouTube or on your favorite podcasting channels. And tell your friends about us. We really would enjoy them coming and being with us. So thanks again, and I'll see you next time.